Good evening.
We will start in a minute now, so let's settle down.
Like that, that's what I am asking now. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Today we are here for the book launch, not the book launch, but the discussion on Shreyas' new book, that is Bahirji-Naik, and we are just going to quickly introduce. I'm very thankful that everybody is here who has taken time this evening, and I'm going to quickly introduce Shreyas Bhave. So Shreyas is a best-selling historical fiction author who has written more than 5 books covering the very interesting Mauryan Empire, with a critically acclaimed Ashoka trilogy that includes Prince of Patliputra, Storm from Takshila, and Nemesis of Kalinga. And the riveting, that is his latest book on Prisoner of Yakuts, based on the mysterious death of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Apart from writing, he is also India's youngest expert on railway electrician, a talented music composer, and he has released an album last year called Flux. His latest book, this one, is surely going to be an interesting read. So Shreyas, welcome to Mumbai and welcome to this event. Needs no introduction, but I'll try my best. She's very down to earth and funny, and she's an accomplished Bollywood actor and a theatre actor and an author. She has played some challenging roles. Her popular theatre plays are That's My Girl and Blind Date. She has also done short films like Spotless and Parinithi. She has also written the well-rated and reviewed book named Filmy Chick Psycho-Filmicizing Life. Then we have today, so thank you Shweta so much.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure being here and a part of this book discussion, because I really enjoyed reading the book and I already have so many questions to ask him.
That's great to know.
It's going to be a long discussion. I am not going to beat around the bush. I'm going to straight read you with questions. So tell me, what made you choose this topic as your next book, and tell us a little about this book before we go next.
So as told in my introduction, actually I have written about history before. So I have written about the Maurya Empire, which was about 300 years before Christ, and I have also written about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's mysterious death. So when I was deciding which topic to write about after this set of books, I came across the persona of Shivaji in my very childhood. Like every childhood, I am a Marathi. So every Marathi child grows up reading about Shivaji Maharaj and all his adventures. So obviously a thought came to my mind that I should write about this time period. But see, lot of things are already written about Shivaji. There are so many books, and I grew up reading some of those gems. In Marathi, actually, there are a plethora of books written about Shivaji Maharaj. So I did not want to add something to a table which was already filled. But then I started exploring the characters which surrounded Raje, and I came across this amazing character of Bahirji-Naik. See, if you go by history, Bahirji-Naik is a non-existent character. If we go by the historical catalogs, the diaries which people kept about the time, and whatever is written about by historians, Bahirji-Naik does not exist. But if we go by the folk tales, there are so many folk tales written about this person and about his participations in the adventures of Shivaji Maharaj. So I was very attracted to this, and I thought that I should write about this topic. So basically this was the reason behind choosing Bahirji-Naik as the topic, and obviously who doesn't like a spy thriller. So Bahirji-Naik was the chief spy of Shivaji Maharaj, and he led the spy system of Shivaji Maharaj, which was very crucial in many of his victories. So I did a special my take on Bahirji-Naik. So Bahirji-Naik historically does not exist, but by folk tales he was one character. But because he did not exist historically, I thought that I can fashion him in my way without disturbing historical authenticity. And whatever is written about Bahirji-Naik in literature is described as a very superhuman person who does miraculous things, who is a master of many arts. So I thought that one person cannot be everything like this. So let us make him two persons. So I split him into a persona of two people, one called Bahirji Bandal and the other one called as Sadashiv Naik. And mixing the two of them comes the title of Bahirji-Naik. So that is the idea behind this book, and that is how it came about.
So thank you for clearing that. How come you decided, to split him into two, and how, you came, and also how the title came out still to be the same, like that one person into two. Besides that, I think everyone who's read the book knows that there is a part 2 coming, because everyone is equally excited to know what happens further. So did you decide consciously that, you don't want to keep it as a book and you want to divide it into 2 parts because there's so many tales with his spy tales that you want to mention? Or was it something that you wrote and you realized, no, first let me give part 1, let the excitement come more, and then you want to go in for part 2?
So basically there are 3 main adventures which happened in the lifetime of Bahirji-Naik, and each of the adventure is so marvelous that only one book can do justice to it. I cannot write about all the adventures in one book. So the first adventure is the Sack of Surat, which happened in 1664, and the first book is about the Sack of Surat, how Surat was sacked by Marathas. It was a city which was very rich, which was protected by a lot of Mughal troops, and it was miles inside Mughal territory. So how did the Marathas manage to sack the city without the Mughals putting up an important defense? And the other 2 events are the siege of Panala and the siege of Purandar, which also play great part was played by Bahirji-Naik. And the third event is the escape from the city of Agra. So actually Shivaji Maharaj went to meet Aurangzeb in Agra, and he was imprisoned in Agra. And it was a great escape from Agra that he managed to make, and Bahirji-Naik had an important part to play in that also. So the next 2 books which are coming, the second book is called as Siege of Panala, and the third book is called as Escape from Agra. So this is how the legend of Bahirji-Naik came about, and it will be a series of 3 books. Let's see, maybe more, because there are many adventures, but I think 3 will do justice to the tale.
So best wishes for this one. This is already doing well, but more best wishes for this one, and best wishes for the other 2 also. But when you write about history, like Shivaji Maharaj has so many books, and now you are touching a subject which is not much written about. Also, you were fictionalizing it. So was there any fear about it? Like, you're taking a big risk, but at the same time, it's a challenge every writer would want to take. So what was your journey like?
So when I research about historical fiction, I have a very unusual method. I read a lot of things, but I use only what is written in the primary sources. So what I mean by primary sources is that a person who has experienced an event and then he is writing about that event somewhere. So that source I called as a primary source. So when I start reading about the tale which I want to write about, I first encounter a lot of secondary sources where people are writing by some hearsay. And from those secondary sources I find out from where I can reach primary sources. And once I reach the primary sources, then I start to form a picture of the story in my head. And basically historical fiction is, let me just give an example. Like when we are very small, when we are in primary school, and our English teacher tells us that make statement positive to negative. She is a good girl. So at that age, people make it from positive to negative that she is not a good girl. But as we grow, we go into middle school, and the same question is given to us that make negative, she is a good girl. So we say that she is not a bad girl, and that is the correct answer. So while writing historical fiction, you can let your imagination run wild. Maybe you can take a lot of creative liberties and you can write anything about history. That is one way to approach historical fiction, which is like a primary school method. But the good and the correct method is that you must gather the facts about history, the facts which are not unchanged, and those facts should remain in your story as it is. And you weave your magic in between those facts. So any historian, if he challenges you, he cannot dispute the facts because those are facts. And what happened between those facts, even the historian does not know. So that is why I was not afraid while writing about this topic, because I stayed true to my mantra. I took the facts, I kept the facts as it is. All historians will agree with the facts, and what happened between them is my story. And I have written about it in the author's note of the book also. But I am 100% sure that any historian sits across the table with me will not able to dispute even one sentence in my book.
So we go back to your mantra, like you said, you did your research, you went to the primary sources, and whatever you fictionalized was in between, which is not written about, and that's why we can even openly challenge. But like you said, you need to do your research to fictionalize it. How long did the research take?
We can say that the research took years, because I have been reading about Shivaji Maharaj since I was a little kid. So in that sort of a way, I have been researching for this tale, for preparing to write this tale since when I was a little child, since I learned to read like 3-4 years. But main sources which I used for this book are the many classics written about Shivaji Raje. There is a book called as Shakakarje Shivraj by Vijay Deshmukh. Then there is the Raja Shiv Chhatrapati by Baba Saheb Purandare. There is the famous play called as Janta Raja. She is also a playwright, so she will be aware of the play. And one of the very wonderful books I came across was about the city of Surat. It is called as Surat in the 17th century, and it is written by a history professor named as Dr. Gokhale. And that book describes everything there is about Surat in the 17th century. Actually, it was a very interesting time because in 17th century, Bombay of today, where we are sitting, did not exist. At that time, Bombay was just an island, and actually it was under the control of Portuguese people. And this is the history of Bombay, that in Europe, a war was happening between England and Portugal, and England won that war. And then a marriage happened as a peace treaty, and in the marriage dowry, the king of Portugal gave away the island of Bombay to English. And so English ship arrived here in Bombay, and the captain of the ship was named as Abraham Shipman, and he was to take charge of the island of Bombay from the Portuguese garrison. But the Portuguese garrison had not received any written letter from Portugal, so they refused, in total bureaucratic style, they refused to give command of the island to Abraham Shipman. So Abraham Shipman landed in the actual big city, big port which was in India at that time, which was Surat. So this event is described in my book also. And the point here is that Surat was the financial capital of India at that time. All trade which came from the western sea to India flowed through Surat. Surat was the richest city, and we can say that Surat was Bombay of that time. So what Shivaji Raje did in Sack of Surat is akin to reading of Bombay today. And basically Surat was a very rich city. It was a cosmopolitan city. People from all over the country were living in Surat. There were Bania traders, there were foreigners like English people, there were Dutch merchants in Surat. The Mughals were the ruling class. Also there were a lot of Marathas also in Surat. And it was a very cosmopolitan town, just like Bombay is right now. And like many Bollywood movies have Bombay as a character, I wanted to give the same place to the city of Surat in my book. So I researched a lot about how exactly the city drank, ate, breathed, what was the trade which was happening, what were people selling. And I discovered a lot of interesting characters. A merchant known as Virji Vora, who used to dominate the English by financial means. There is a merchant known as Haji Kasim, who was the #1 rival of Virji Vora in Surat. Then there is the Killadar and the governor of Surat, a father-son duo known as Inayat Khan and Muhabbat Khan, who are very corrupt people. And some of their scams also are exposed in this book, like the scams of government which are exposed today in the same way. They also did some scams, and demonetization also happened in Surat. So we can say that history keeps on repeating itself. So all these interesting things I found, and I've used them in my book. And if you read it, you will be able to live the history, and you will be able to compare it with events of today.
I agree with you totally, because the way you have described every character, it is visually there. Like, you can see it between the pages. How important is it for a writer to see it as a screen adaptation?
I think that my writing style naturally flows towards that style, because I write a lot of dialogues. So you will find more dialogues in my story than prose. And maybe that's why my first book, Prince of Patliputra, was optioned for screen. It was optioned by a Mumbai-based studio, but unfortunately it has not come out yet. But coming of a book to screen takes a lot of time. Like Sacred Games came out in 2019, while the book was written in 2007. So you can say that maybe in future some of my books will also come out to the screen. And I think that some people naturally write in a format that is more suitable to the screen way. And some people write in a fact which is not suitable to a screen way. Like if you are describing what is happening inside the character's brain a lot in your story, then maybe that is very difficult to show on screen. But if you are following the basic writer's rule of show, don't tell, you are showing the reader what is happening, and the reader can interpret the events on his own. Then it becomes very easy to show it on screen. And the normal rules of fiction that keep it fast, keep it interesting, and have a lot of characters interacting with each other. So those work well for screen adaptation as well.
Well, you have a lot of characters, and the best part is when you start the book, you've given a description about each one of them. So even when you're reading, by chance, you take a small break, you can go back and remember, oh, this is a character. You've given these small summaries of each character. So was it done consciously so that a person doesn't get lost while reading? Like, what was the reason to give that in the beginning itself of the book?
Actually, that was done by my editor. So I have this great editor. Her name is Chandralekha Maitra. So she has been editing all of my books from the start. She is with Leadstart Publishing, and she is also the editor of Anand Neelkantham. And she is like a 70-plus-year-old lady. She is very experienced in the field of publishing, and I got a lot of guidance from her. And putting the characters of the story in the start was her brainchild. So from my first book, we have been doing that, and we've been following the format until now. And it was she who insisted that while Indian readers need such kind of a list, they need such kind of a reference. And also it acts as a hook, because we describe the characters in the list of characters. And while reading about the characters, the reader is intrigued. Okay, who is this man? What role does he have in the story? So it actually also acts like a trailer of sort for the books. So that was the reason we put the list of characters in.
You know, like you mentioned, it was the editor's idea, and she's been editing your book like from the very first book. And you know, I always believe that the editor and the writer have to be like glove and hand. They have to be in the same. So what is your take on it?
There is a very beautiful Hollywood movie called as Genius. It's about the relationship between an author and his editor. Like if you like this topic, maybe you should watch that movie. There is a famous American writer named of Thomas Wolfe, and the story is about HarperCollins, and his editor was from HarperCollins. And it's a beautiful relationship, how they fight, how they bicker, the personal problems which happen in their lives. And the ending of the movie is very apt, and I'll answer that question by telling you that ending. The ending is such that they struggle over it's a very famous book written by Thomas Wolfe about which the story is. And they struggle about a lot of things, what to cut out of the story, what to do with the story, what to change in the story. And at the end, Thomas Wolfe goes to the editor and says that I want to add one more line in the book. And the editor closes the manuscript and says, Thomas, if you are going to add one more line, we are lost. And Thomas reads out the line. He says that this book is dedicated to, he says, the editor's name. And I hope that it proves worthy of him. So that is what feelings a writer has about his editor. And please see this movie if you like this topic.
There are some fights or some discussions that you had with your editor, which was where, you know, your editor had to tell you that this is it. There is not one more line happening. So tell us some moments with your editor while this entire process of so many books and she editing all of them.
My working with Chandralekha was very wonderful. I got a lot to learn from her. Mostly we never struggled about the story, because she liked the stories and she kept the stories as it is. She mostly worked on improving the prose and the structure, and she brought her a lot of 70+ years of experience into the field. The most thing which we always fought about were the book covers. So I'll tell you about how a book cover is commissioned by a publisher. Generally a publisher hires an outside design agency to design a book cover, and they generally come up with two options, and the two options are almost every time poles apart. So for each of my book, I have made a reel on this topic also on Instagram, so if you can check it out on my Instagram, you'll be able to see. On each of my books, two very radical different covers were made, and each time my editor and I chose the different covers. And actually my choice and the choice of the marketing team of the publishing always used to match, so our covers used to win. And my editor was always choosing the other cover, because the other covers were more earthy and more true to the story. Like you can see this cover, there are 3 horsemen who are flying in the air in a blaze of fire. And after the event, maybe I'll show you the cover which was the other cover for this book. And again my editor chose that cover, but we and the marketing team chose this cover, because I hope that this cover is good. Maybe you can tell me more. So that was the thing which we always fought about.
You know, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but fortunately or unfortunately we all do that. Like the blur comes in later. It's always when we enter a bookshop, we'll end up seeing the cover and then, you know, we go ahead. According to you, how important is the cover?
I think in today's day and age, the cover is very important. When people are looking at Instagram reels and short video, people have become very visual persons. So they have to find and see something which they like. Maybe if they don't like the cover, they won't go into the content. And the cover sure acts as an attractive factor. If the cover is good, the person is intrigued about what's inside the book. Then maybe he flips the book and reads the blurb. If he likes the blurb, maybe he goes inside and looks at 1 or 2 pages. It's very important for new authors. Maybe if you are looking at a book by Ruskin Bond, you won't care about the cover. But when new authors are coming out, I think that the cover is very important, and that's why we always try to have attractive covers. So I'll tell you who made this cover. So this cover is made by a studio called as Kitsune in Bombay. So they have made cover for 2 of my books, this one and the one about Netaji Bose. So the cover of the Netaji Bose book is also attractive. If you can Google Prisoner of Yakutsk, you'll be able to see the cover. Just like a new actor or a new musician has to do a lot of window dressing, I can say that this cover is a window dressing by the new authors.
You have been writing about history, even if we say, like all your books in the past and even this one, even Netaji needed a lot of research and then, you wrote about it. When did you realize that you love history as a subject?
Since I was in school, history had been my favorite subject, and I don't want to tell this, but I used to correct my history teacher in school. Like we used to have a lot of fights कि नहीं ऐसा हुआ था, and she used to say नहीं ऐसा हुआ था, and I used to read some other book and I used to bring that book to school and show her कि नहीं ये तो ऐसा ही हुआ था. So a lot of my schoolmates, unfortunately none of them could come here today, but they will agree to this fact. History has fascinated me right from the childhood, and I have read a lot of books of history in Marathi as well and English as well, and I just love the way history repeats itself. Just like I told that demonetization happened in Suraj in 1664 also, and it happened in India in 2017 also. So how does it happen that 300 years apart the same event occurs? The more and more we study history, the more deep we go into history, we realize that everything is a cycle. And there's a great American economist by the name of Ray Dalio. He has also written about this subject, that there are patterns in history and they keep on repeating themselves. Superpowers rise and then crash, and then new powers emerge, and there is a changing world order which continuously keeps on changing. And if we study history, if we read about history, we can get to know what is the good way, what is the prudent way to act for future also. That and history acts as a big source of inspiration. Like when I published my first book, I was just graduating from engineering, and people used to say to me कि सही है यार तूने तो इतने कम एज में book लिख लिया, and I was like कि but किसके बारे में लिखा है? I'm writing about Alexander who had conquered the world at the age of 18. तो मैंने तो कुछ नहीं किया उसके comparison में. So you get inspired by a lot of people in history. Like Napoleon Bonaparte is my favorite historical character, and there are many such characters, many kings, many. When you read about them, you feel charged from the inside. Ki I also want to do good things. I also want to do big things, and that is very important when you are in your down days. So that is why I feel that I like history, and history can help a lot people with a lot of things.
And I agree with you that many a times there are a lot of characters out there who motivate. Even the books teach you a lot, be it a fictional book or be it a self-help book or a motivational book. And every writer, when he's created and crafted a book, looks out for the reviews. So how do you take the criticism and the appreciation?
When my first book came out, for 5 to 6 months, no negative review came. And I was very worried because all famous best-selling authors always write about the negative reviews that they received early on and how in spite of that they become best-selling. And I used to think that अरे यार एक भी negative review आ नहीं रहा, मैं तो पक्का bestseller नहीं बनूंगा. So I have got a few negative reviews, but almost all the negative reviews which I have received have been very critical about some factors which I had also missed in the books. But most of all, 85% I have received good reviews, and the negative reviews which also I have received right in the way that कि ये एक चीज़ गलत हुआ तेरा, but बाकी सब सही है. So let's say that people are liking my writing, and I'm keeping improving in my craft, and I'll hope that I'll be able to craft better books in the future.
How do you introspect yourself from your first book to now?
I think my editor will be able to answer that question in a better way.
But since we don't have her here, what do you think she would have said if I'd asked her this question now?
So I learned a lot about the art of writing over the course of writing all my 5 books. So if somebody is here who has read all my 5 books, I think they'll be able to tell the difference in the writing which has happened. So I discovered some very subtle secrets in the art of writing, some of which I'll share with you. Like I used to write and paragraphs in the starting, and I used to be able to find the difference between the 2 paragraphs. कि ये अच्छा है, ये अच्छा नहीं है. But what exactly caused that difference, I was not able to find out. Then slowly, as I wrote more, as I read more, I came to know कि yes, there are some things which you follow, it can cause a good writing. Like एक tip which I found out was that if you think like the voice in your head, there is this voice in the head of everybody around us. Like we don't think like this. We think like this, like this, like this. Like when you're sitting here, maybe you're listening to me and then suddenly you'll remember कि घर में कुछ तो भी है. Or you'll think about the weather कि weather बहुत खराब है. Or maybe you'll see this hall and you'll remember some other event which happened there. So the human mind is continuously running around in circles. And if we write our narrator in the book like the voice in our head, what happens is that while reading, the voice speaks to the reader from inside, and the reader thinks that it is happening inside his head, and then he manages to read it very smoothly and he lives that experience. So that is a very great secret which I discovered, and I use it while writing now consciously, and I think that it makes a great difference in what makes a prose more beautiful and what makes it less interesting.
Do you think like writers are born writers, or one needs to work on the craft and anybody can become a writer by working on their craft?
I don't know whether anybody can able to become a writer, but I think that I was a born writer. When I was small, I used to draw cartoons and I used to make comics. So I have this very beautiful analogy that a reader's life progresses in this way. When he's small, he starts with reading picture books. Like our mother tells us कि ये देखो ये elephant है, ये parrot है. Picture books we see. Then slowly when we get older, we start reading comic books. Then slowly we start reading children's fiction like Enid Blyton and sort of that. Then we start reading adult fiction, and then slowly we start reading non-fiction. So that is how a reader's life progresses. While a writer's life progresses in a reverse way. A writer generally starts about by writing non-fiction. School में अपन essays लिखते हैं. We write some article in a newspaper or something like that. So we start with non-fiction. Then we slowly move towards fiction. And writing children's fiction is tougher than writing adult fiction. So if you are getting more good at the craft, maybe you will start writing children's fiction and children will maybe love it. And then maybe you will go into the comic book world and start writing comics. So a writer's life happens in the reverse way. And same happened with me. So now I am at that adult fiction stage. Let's hope that maybe I'll be able to go to children's fiction also sometime in the future. And my father used to tell me my father used to tell me a lot of made up stories when I was a kid. Like ऐसे हम बस से जा रहे हैं and एक wall पे Zingaro का ad है. Zingaro used to be a beer brand from a lot of old days, and he used to create a character out of thin air, Dr. Zingaro. So my father basically I think had that gene, and he could never write. He's also an electrical engineer like me, but maybe that passed on to me and I managed to write about books and history.
If you had to have Bahirji-Naik in front of you, what is it that you would tell him today?
So Bahirji-Naik is a very awe-inspiring character. There have been many stories written about him. Recently some movies have also come out in Marathi. There is a movie called as Farzand, and there is also a very famous book called as Bajind, which talks about him in a non-fiction way. So I would really like to ask him about the methods he used to get the results that he did. You will realize that the things that Bahirji-Naik did are very hard to do even today. And that was the time when there were no internet, no technology, no cars, no mediums of communication. So how is it that Gupta here manages to infiltrate Surat, gather all the information about the city, pass it on to his king without anybody knowing? Because when Shivaji reached Surat, he knew the name of all the rich merchants there. He sends a letter to the governor of the city कि ये लोग आके मुझे खंडनी दो, नहीं तो मैं city को raid कर दूँगा. So how is it that he knew? Somebody found out that information and somebody related it to them. So basically, how did he do that? Escape from Agra was such a big event. Shivaji went to Agra to meet Aurangzeb. He was put under house arrest in Agra. And Agra was a total city controlled by Mughals, their henchmen, their army. And how is it that he managed to escape from Agra? How is it that he managed to escape without nobody knowing? And escaping from Agra was just the first part of the story. Because there are many miles between Agra to his homeland, which was Rajgarh near Pune. So how did he come back? What issues did he face while coming back? And how did Bahirji-Naik help him in all those events? Those are the questions which I will surely like to ask him. And I am sure many of you will also like to ask him the same thing.
If you had to have your wish list character, that you could choose this particular actor for this particular character, which were the ones that you would want and for which main characters?
My most famous book is Prisoner of Yakutsk. It's about the death mystery of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. After this book I had written, a movie called as Rangoon came out. That movie did not get many good reviews, but I loved the cast of that film and I related with the cast with my book. Like I thought that in my book there are some characters which are ex-INA. There is a couple called as Dr. and Mrs. Singh, and then there is a character called as Irshad Akhtar, and there are two more characters. So I was like कि अगर शाहिद कपूर Dr. Singh बने, कंगना रनाउत Mrs. Singh बने, and सैफ अली खान इरशाद अख्तर बने और ये मूवी एक्चुअल में हो मेरे बुक पर की तो क्या सही लगेगा. So that is the thing.
तो अगर अभी भायरजी कौन बने और नायक कौन बने?
I think that if that part is done by Ajay Devgan and Akshay Kumar, it will be very good. It will be fantastic.
Before we go to the next question, can you read a passage for our viewers out here?
Yeah, sure. So I think we talked about demonetization. So let me read a passage on demonetization from my book. So the theme is like this, that Suraj is governed by a father-son duo. Father is called as Inayat Khan, he is the Subedar of the city, and his son is Mohabbat Khan, who is the Killadar of the city. And Mughals had this very wonderful system of division of power. So Subedar used to control all the commercial matters, and the Killadar used to control all the military matters. The police and all of the city he used to control. So generally it never occurred that the Subedar and the Killadar of the city are related. Just like we divide power in today's democracy, the Mughals were doing that in that age. But these fathers and duo, by corrupting and by greasing the right hands in Agra, managed to conquer power in both the positions in Surat. And they managed to get a lot of money through unfair means, and this part is about that. So it is from a chapter which is called as, I think, the Lion's Den, right?
That's my favorite chapter. I think I told you that as I came in.
Yeah. While I read this passage, you will also realize that this is not just a tale of Bahirji-Naik. It is a tale of lot of characters in Surat. It's a tale of the British George Oxenden, who used to lead the British in Surat. Then it is also the tale of merchants like Virji Vora and Haji Kasim, who used to battle it out in the markets. And also it's a story about the Surat's underworld, the gangsters in Surat, right? Once upon a time in Mumbai type, once upon a time in Surat. So there is this gangster in Surat called as Samsher Ali, who is taking street bets and all those kind of things. And there is a mysterious master wearing an iron mask who leads him, who gives him secret information. So there is a big question in this book, that who is the master, who is the face beneath his mask. So that is also a storyline in my book. So here the conversation starts between Inayat Khan and Mohabbat Khan, and the British had, the East India Company actually had a factory here in Surat, and the man who led the entire operation in India was known as George Oxenden. So George Oxenden is called into a meeting by Mohabbat Khan and Inayat Khan, and Oxenden has gone to their fort, the Surat fort, to talk to them. So in the passage starts where Mohabbat Khan is welcoming George Oxenden, and there is a lot of prose in it, but I'll only read the dialogues because I have said that the dialogues are my forte. So Mohabbat Khan says, "Welcome. It has taken a while for the president of the Angres to step foot inside the Killa." Then Oxenden says that in our country it is considered polite to await an invitation from the host. And Mohabbat Khan says that, "And yet you visit our country without one. I hope the Shethji Vora was clear on the etiquette to be followed for meeting with the Mughal Subedar." Oxenden nods. He says that, yeah, the Shethji knows both our cultures well. I am sure his instructions were correct. And then Mohabbat Khan takes him to his father, who is the Inayat Khan. And he says, "Welcome to the abode of Subedar, my father." And Oxenden walks towards him, and Oxenden gives him a little gift of honey, and then Inayat Khan accepts it. And then they start talking. So the Inayat Khan takes the honey and says that, "A gift? You give me honey?" And then Oxenden says that the Shethji told me that your religion preaches humility and simplicity. So what better gift can be there than the purity of honey? And Inayat Khan clears his throat, and then he says that, "I do not recall the name of your predecessor in Surat, but it appears that he did not fulfill his duty in instructing you about the local customs before he left." And then Oxenden says that, yeah, he told me that in Surat to do business we have to pay our taxes. Ah, taxes, Inayat Khan says. But there are some things that defy the written word, don't you think? Then Mohabbat Khan stands up and he asks, "So do you pay your taxes?" Then Oxenden says that the right question perhaps is, "Am I paying the right taxes?" Then Inayat Khan bursts into laughter, and then he says that, "Yeah, that is indeed the question. Do you think you are paying the right taxes? For 6 moons you have been the Angres president in Surat, yet you have paid us nothing. You bring into our ports material with thousands of Mahmudis, yet not one Mahmudi finds its way to us. And then they threaten Oxenden a lot, but they said that okay, there is a way to forgive you, and this is the way. So they told Oxenden that we have found ourselves in possession of a vast amount of Mahmudis from the past few years. Oxenden thinks that yeah, no doubt from all the taxes. And then Inayat Khan says that now normally we use the Mahmudis for whatever purpose we choose. But there has been word that Agra is looking to declare Mahmudis as illegal. There have been rumors that the Alamgir, blessed be his name, is soon to issue a farman from his holy city in Agra to change the Mahmudi into another coin, a process the common folk called as Sikka Bandi. So this is the demonetization of the 17th century. And so Oxenden is very worried. He says, but what you speak of is changing of an entire currency. It could disrupt the entire flow of trade for many months. And then Muhabbat Khan says that Agra does not give two figs about disruption of trade. Coins have been changed for far less. A few decades ago, the Emperor Shah Jahan banned an entire series of coins because he did not like the symbols on them. So it was carrying, the earlier coin was carrying the face of the Shah Jahan's father, and Shah Jahan actually usurped the throne of his father. So he did not want the coins to have his father's face, so he declared all the coins as illegal and issued new coins. And in 1664, Aurangzeb did the same thing. So this is the actual event that the demonetization historically happened in Suraj, and it is covered in my book. And then the Muhabbat Khan and Inayat Khan say to Oxenden that from times immemorial there has been a currency which can never be changed, and that is gold. And so the storyline runs like this, that they ask Oxenden to build a gold bullion into the city, and they want to exchange their Mahmudis for the gold, so that when the Mahmudis are declared as illegal, they'll be having the gold, which will anyway work. So these are the types of stories which are described in the book, and all the stories emerge into a big potboiler of sorts, and then there is this big climax. So I guess that to find out more, you'll have to read the book, and maybe I hope that this has raised your interest about the book.
All you people out here, all you have to do is buy your copies, get it signed from him, and then read and review it and spread the word. And this is just the first one, and there are 2 more coming. So get all excited for this and more. What was your schedule of writing this particular book?
I follow a very normal schedule. Like on a good day, I'll write up to 4,000 words in a day. We all writers talk in words because generally a good novel is 80,000 words long. So everything we talk in words. So on a good day, I'll write 4,000 words, and on a very bad day, I'll not be able to reach even 500. So I think I managed an average word rate of 2,000 per day for this book, and then we write the second draft, we write the third draft. It takes a span of about 6 to 7 months to finish one book.
Do you think it is important to have a literary agent when you write a book to pitch it to publishing houses, or a writer can do it by themselves?
Having a literary agent is always good. Unfortunately, I was never able to have one because I got associated with Leadstart from my very first book. But having a literary agent is a good thing because a literary agent knows the industry, he has connections in the industry, and he can help increase the value of your work. Like a very good example I would like to give you is that my first book of the Ashoka trilogy was optioned for screen, and my publisher handled all the negotiations for that. And what used to happen is that the party which bought the rights, they used to give a number, and the number was good. So I used to say, "ठीक है, हाँ बोल दो इसको," because I never thought that my book somebody will pay this huge amount for my book. And the publisher used to be like, "नहीं, इनका first offer है, let me negotiate further." So an agent can play that role for you. An agent can help you increase the value of your work because you yourself always don't think much of your work. Because I have this very nice idiom which I have created, that a good artist, when he creates a masterpiece, he puts it up and sells it for gain. But when a great artist creates a masterpiece, he rubs it down and he says that I can do it again.
Wow, that's a highlighting point, I must say. You got lucky. You had your first book with the publishing house, and then you've been with them because things have been great. But if you go to a literary agent, that literary agent sends your copies to a lot more publishing houses, and literally a book is there with all publishing houses. And in today's time, with numerous ones of them, do you think it is important to copyright your work before giving it out? What is your take on it?
Yeah, one can always copyright register their work. Like it's a not very complex process. Like I copyrighted my first 3-4 books myself. You have to send some documents to the registry of copyright to Mumbai, And but after my third book I stopped doing that, because what happens that once your book is published, a ISBN code is assigned to that book, and that ISBN code also holds up in court. Basically your copyright is going to come into the picture when there is going to be a dispute about who wrote this work. And whoever will have the registered copyright or the earlier ISBN will be considered as the original author by the court. So if your book is getting published and you know the timeline when it will be published, I don't think that it is necessary to copyright. And in modern day and age, there are a lot of evidences, like there is an email trail. If you can prove that this file was created by you, was emailed by you on this particular date, and if the other party can't prove that, then maybe copyright registration is not all that essential in today's world.
My last question to you is that in today's time, writing is important, but how important is marketing the book?
Marketing is सब कुछ है यार. Like Ashwin Sanghi, he is also having his book launch today. So he has a very good saying. He says that write when drunk, edit when sober, and marketing is the hangover. So marketing a book is very important because unless you market it, nobody is going to know about it. And until they know about it, they can't really read it. And until they read it, they can't really know how good is it or not, or they can't have an opinion about it. So even if you write a very good book, if it's not marketed well, not many people will get to know about it. So yeah, marketing is a very important pillar of the book publishing process.
In fact, today when his Magic of Mazda is releasing, and I told him, I said, many a times, now you become a pro, there are so many books come out. And he said, no, in fact, if you give 4 years to writing, give another 6 years to marketing the book, because you have to constantly keep telling the viewers that we are there.
Yeah, there are all kinds of authors, like Ashwin is also heavily into marketing, but like Anand Neelkantham, who has written Asura, in my very initial days, I reached out to him and I spoke to him about how the publishing industry works and all that. So he had a very counter opinion about this. He said that publisher pay you 7% royalty on the book, so you should also participate only 7% in the marketing. Baki to unka kaam hai. So there are a lot of authors and everybody is having a different opinion about this matter.
So let's start signing, and how about signing my copy first?
Yeah, sure.
I would also like to thank the venue, Canary, for giving us this space to hold this discussion, and of course Deepak, Puneet, and everyone who has come here today. And yes, so now you can have, if you want to buy or you want to get your book signed, we can start that.